All right, so welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Um, Hope you had a good weekend, and I hope you are looking forward to a short school week. Um, just as a heads up, I am recording today's intro. As I've explained before, nothing that you say or nothing from Teams will be present in the recording, but just to make sure that if anybody misses or absent understands what we were talking about here today. I am going to be showing both my computer screen and my iPad, so please make sure that you have or you can see all four orange borders around my screen. You should know how to fix that at this point in time, but if not, it's right there on the screen. You can right-click on my video feed and pin me, and then right-click and fit to frame, and you should be able to see all four orange borders. Give you a second to take care of that, but since we've been doing that for a little while, you should be good. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and jump into our It's Learning page. So if you're looking at our It's Learning page for today, you should have seen that while we were waiting for class to start, while we gave you a few minutes for the warm-up at the beginning of class, you should have worked on the gravity portion of our Quizlet. The 2.2 Quizlet is due tomorrow at 11:59 p.m., end of the day, according to It's Learning. So at this point, if you've been following along with the daily emails and the pacing guide and the talking and all that type of stuff, you have one last activity to do, and that is gravity. So you should be able to check that off the list here today, if you haven't already done so. I'm going to take a few minutes at the beginning here to talk about, I said 2.2 content, but really 2.2.1. I just want to review the cockroach flow chart that we worked on. I shared some feedback with everyone who submitted the assignment, but just to explicitly say it out loud and ask you, give you some time to ask questions about this, I do want to talk about the, again, the 2.2.1 flow chart that you created. It's one of our graded assignments so far this quarter. Again, if you turned in the assignment, you got feedback from me in It's Learning, but if I can just switch to my iPad for a moment and walk you through some of the common misconceptions that I saw, just to make sure we're on the same page. All right, so I popped over to the side in my little flow chart here, so I'm not covering anything up, but you should be able to see a slide that I made in Adobe Illustrator trying to just chart out the cockroach reaction. Yours doesn't have to have this orientation or the specific number of steps or the words that I have here, but this is what I'm looking for from the cockroach flowchart activity. So using Notability as the app here that I'm going to be talking, using to talk, there is also this little presenter tool, little laser pointer thing. So I'll be using that and annotating a little bit on the slide, but mainly just talking about it. So anyway, the major concern here is, concern, like the thing to talk about here. It's not like a big deal, but the piece of feedback that I want to give here is really related to the borders around interneurons and the responsibility of interneurons. So I understand how interneurons can be difficult or confusing, but let's go ahead and just go through linearly the flow chart here. So the narrative of the assignment is that you see a cockroach and you're going to chart out, kind of in a zoomed out view a little bit, of the different things that are going to happen in the body to react to seeing that cockroach run across the floor. So something to help out understand this concept here there is the light travels to the eye. We're not going to get into the physics of photons and all that stuff, but just just to understand, right, this helps us, I think, draw the border around the brain, what the brain does. If I see a cockroach run across the floor over there, my eye doesn't do anything. Meaning, my eye doesn't have any emotional reaction to seeing anything. That was one of the things I saw on a lot of flowcharts, was that the eye creates a fear stimulus or something like that. It was a strange term that I saw in a couple of people saying that the eye doesn't think, it doesn't really react in the sense that we're talking about here. The eye's job, much like the camera that I'm talking into right now, or the lens on that camera, its only job is to focus light. The eye is just a squishy, incredible, but just a soft, squishy lens. It's just focusing light. That's its only job. It does that in a cool way, and you can see like an iris open and close, and there's all kinds of cool things about the eye. I'm not trying to say the eye is not cool. We're actually going to study it and learn more about it in 2.4, but there's no cognition, there's no thought coming from the eye. It just focuses light on the retina, which is a part of the eye, but is also the dendrites of a sensory neuron. So that's the next stage here. So coming out of the back of the eye is the optic nerve, and its dendrites of that nerve are actually inside of the eye, and they come out of the back of the eye and take that signal, whatever photons are detected by the eye, it takes that signal and sends it to the brain. Now, the optic nerve is a special type of nerve called a cranial nerve. So it has a direct connection to the brain. It doesn't go to the spinal cord first. The optic nerve comes out of the back of the eye and basically takes a straight line to the occipital lobe. There's some nuance there that we're not going to get into, but for the sake of understanding that it's a cranial nerve, it goes straight to the occipital lobe. And that's what I have tried to identify here. So I'm going to draw a little blue box around this side of our little diagram here. And again, you didn't have to draw this box or have to have everything organized the way I have it organized. But I just want to identify that everything I just drew a blue box around, even though I kind of cut off my pictures there a little bit, are interneurons. So this part in red right above me, that's a sensory neuron. That neuron collects information from the outside world and sends it to the brain. And in this case, it goes straight to the brain. And that synapse, which connects the optic nerve with the occipital lobe of the brain, is the border between the sensory neurons and the interneurons. In this case, there are no interneurons that are in between the eye and the brain. A lot of people said the optic nerve, or they didn't say the optic nerve, they said sensory neurons would take the signal to the interneurons, which would take the signal to the brain. That would be true if I felt a cockroach run across my arm, and the sensory neurons in my arm would take that signal to my spinal cord, which is interneurons, and then carry that signal out to my brain. But in this case, it's going straight from the eye into the brain, and the brain is interneurons. And if you look down at the bottom of my blue box here, also is the spinal cord. So the spinal cord and the brain, the central nervous system, are made up of interneurons. But what I ended up drawing over here in this area is a little diagram, just making sure that we understand it. In this, for the most part, going this path, I'm not putting a lot of emphasis on the brain. The brain's just one stop in this chain like everything else is. But in all honesty, this section over here, right, is incredibly intense. There's multiple different lobes of the brain, multiple different functions going on. The optic the optic nerve carries the signal back to our occipital lobe, and that's where we first see something, right? The eye didn't see anything. It organized light and recorded that light and sent that light information to the brain, but the brain does the seeing. And then the brain did the recognition, saying, okay, we know what that shape is. That's a cockroach. And then the brain made the decisions about, I had bad experiences in the past and had memories, right? And made decisions about what to do, and then generated the commands about how to react, and then organized those commands to be as efficient as possible, and then sent those commands. Like this section, that corner, it's going in reverse, that corner over there is super dense, but it's just one little bullet point on our stop here. So we're not going into much more detail than that. If you did go into more detail over here on your flow chart, that's great. That's not a problem. But we want to make sure we know that the interneurons, the brain is interneurons, and those interneurons did a bunch of work. The interneurons are the only types of neurons that really do any thinking or processing or creation or interpretation. Like the interneurons are the special ones. The sensory neurons and the motor neurons are incredibly important, and I'm not devaluing them, but they're basically just things to carry signals. Sensory neurons carry signals into the interneuron or to the interneurons, so signals from the outside world to the central nervous system, and then the central nervous system, which are interneurons, does all that amazing thinking and stuff, and then sends those commands out through, and that's where we're going to come down to below where I am on the screen right here, and down to these motor neurons, which send commands to muscles. So above me are the inputs. To the side of me is all the incredible thinking, and below me are just outputs. So we want to make sure that we're assigning the tasks to the correct areas, because that was something, just as a theme around this area, was a lot of people's answers put emphasis on the eye. I was going to say like bringing baggage, but I don't know if that's an appropriate way of saying it. The eye has a say in it, or is somehow influencing something, when it's just literally just focusing light. That's its job. And then the sensory neurons are just bringing that information about light to the brain. The brain does all the work, and then the commands, the motor neurons don't move the hand. And I know this might seem nuanced, like being picky, but the motor neurons don't move anything. The motor neurons bring the command to the muscles to do the movement. And that distinction right now is going to help us in Unit 4. So it's going to pay off much later, but we need to understand that, again, the neurons are just carrying signals. They can't move anything. They can bring the commands to something to make that thing move, which, again, I know might seem like I'm being picky about how we're saying this, but they're just bringing information to muscle or gland or something like that. And that gland is then doing something. That muscle is then doing something. And the same information up top to the sensory neurons, again, they're just bringing information. They're not tainting or influencing that information at all, just bringing pure information to the brain. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to provide that distinction. the interneurons, the things that are in the blue box, so the brain and the spinal cord, are what do the thinking and processing, and the things underlined in red are the parts, or overlined in red, I guess, are the parts that do the moving of information, whether bringing in or taking out. They just move information. And then we have the farthest side, all the way over here, purple. This area is really, the outside world. I guess the muscles are not the outside world, but the leg crushing the cockroach in this case would be the outside world. So again, your flow chart, you have a video, a link to a YouTube video where I walk through this. So if you answered this question, if you did the work and turned it in, your feedback from me included not only your grade, but also a link to that video that walks you through this but it's me focused on explaining it, not correcting mistakes. So it's a little bit of a different way of me talking about all this stuff. But anyway, thanks for giving me a few minutes to try to correct some of those misconceptions. Any questions about that at this point in time? The Teams is being weird for me recently, so I'm just going to say it out loud. I'm checking comments and I don't see any comments, which is fine, but I'm not ignoring you if you commented and I can't see it. And I don't see any hands up right now. Again, both of those statements are fine. Just making sure that I don't see anything. So if you do have a question, you might just have to come off mute and say it out loud. Again, the recording won't hear you. Okay. If you have an individual question or something comes up later, feel free to send me an email. But at this point, I'm going to switch back over to, there we go, to It's Learning. So we just went over the misconceptions part. And then for your assignment today, my biggest emphasis for today, for the rest of today, the purpose for the rest of today's class is just trying to make sure that we clean up anything left over from the unit so far. We just want to make sure we'll walk away from 2020 with a clean slate. So today's class and the little fragment of class that we're going to have for our early dismissal day on Wednesday is just going to be dedicated to making sure that you got all that stuff taken care of. So I gave you a little hierarchy here to triage your work. So from top to bottom, I would make sure that you have completed the 2.2 Quizlet. I'll stop the recording in a minute and show you your current status, but I checked your Quizlet this morning and sent you the emails with your current status. I am, for both the 2.2 Quizlet and the 2.2 quiz, for both of these assignments, in just a minute once I put up the work slide and we start going to work, I'm going to update your grade. Neither of these assignments are due right now, but I've had a couple people ask what these assignments have done to the grade or will do to the grade and stuff like that. And I understand some people just, I'm not endorsing this behavior, so to speak, but, if somebody doesn't want to finish one of these two assignments or doesn't want to do it again to get a better grade, they want to know if they have to do that or not. Do they have an A or do they need to take the quiz again to try to get a higher grade to get a B? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to update the current status where you currently are for both of those assignments into Hack. So before the end of class, really in the middle of class, you'll get an update with your grade based on your current best attempt at 2.2 quiz and your status as of this morning of the 2.2 Quizlet. I will update the grade again on Wednesday morning for both of these assignments in case you do take those assignments again and do a better job. But I just want you to know where your current status is based on your current work. So I will update HACK with those 2 assignments with their current status. That doesn't mean that they're due, and that doesn't mean that you can't keep working on them. But you'll just know what your current status is. And then the last 2 items, this one, I just want you, after you see how the current status and what your current grade is, also please look through and make sure that your grade in HACK matches your understanding. If you haven't, or if I haven't said this explicitly, or you haven't noticed it already this year, I'll put an NHI in for any grade that has the assignment is past due and you have not submitted something. So if you have an NHI for assignment in HACK, that means you have not handed it in. That means you should have by now, and you haven't, so that's a 0. You can still do it as a blanket policy for everything we've done. You can turn in missing work whenever you get it done. But just to understand, that's what that means, is that I currently don't have anything for you. However, if you have a blank grade, that means you have turned in the assignment and I haven't graded it yet. Or, as some people need to double check, their 2.2.1 flowcharts, the things we just went over, a couple people have had some problems with that. Not the student's fault. Its Learning has, for some reason, decided to compress some people's images so much that it looks like a original Nintendo game. I can't read them. They're so pixelated. So I've left comments for people who that happened to. I can't understand the reason, or I don't see the pattern for why it happened to some people and not other people. I don't know enough about what you were doing to upload the assignments to understand it. But I've asked people who have had uploading problems to please use an app, an Office 365 app that will scan documents. Use your camera phone to scan an image or piece of paper into a PDF into your OneDrive, which you can then use as an assignment. So please check HACK. If you do have a blank grade for anything, make sure you're checking It's Learning and looking for the comments to see if you are somebody who was impacted by that, so we can fix it. So that's what the long way of saying this bullet point is just about making sure you clean up your grade. Any missing work, please let's again go into 2021 with a clean slate. Let's just get everything taken care of here today and next class. And then the 4th bullet point is just asking you to finish or submit your action potential graph, that flip grid that we worked on last class. This is not a grade. This is just for me to hear you explain action potential. It helps me understand how much you know. Just another piece of feedback for me, another piece of information for me to understand your understanding. The information about that you can find if you scroll down to week 15, lesson 2. It has the links to where to go and what to do and how to do that assignment. So that was your preparation for today's lesson for last week. And then recording that is all explained there. So you can just scroll down the page to get to week 15, lesson 2 if you don't remember what to do for this assignment. But the remaining 45 minutes or so of class is yours to work on these 4 tasks. Some of you have tasks that are completed that are totally fine. You don't have any missing work and you're all good to go. This is all I have for you today. Today is all about just cleaning up. So if you've already cleaned up, you're good to go. I'll show you your current Quizlet status here in a minute as soon as I stop the recording, but you are under no obligation to stay here until 1:55 if you have taken care of everything and you're all good to go. Feel free to have an early day, but otherwise I'm providing this 45-minute time for people to get their grades squared away and straightened up and cleaned up And I would appreciate anyone who needs any of that time to use all of that time today.